Sir Chris Stevens.
Thank you very much, Sir David. It's a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship. Can I also join other honourable members in congratulating the honourable member for Belfast East in securing this particular debate, and I think he did so in a very effective and compassionate way, and I congratulate him for that. Sir David, for those who are watching these proceedings, let me first of all explain some of the issues. Social fund funeral payments cover the actual expenses of a funeral, for example the burial plot, grave digging, cremation fees, reasonable transport costs to move the body, reasonable expenses for one return journey within the UK for a responsible person to arrange or attend the funeral. In addition, up to £700 can be, as we've heard from other honourable members, can be paid for things like the funeral director's fees, flowers, church fees, etc. This has been capped at this level, as we've heard, since April 2003, and the Welfare Reform Act 2012 extended the scope of budgeting loans to include funeral costs, which allows the claimants to top up this payment via loans deducted from their future benefit payments. This has, in our view, Sir David, allowed the UK Government to dodge the responsibility of increasing the cap in line with inflation. Because if it had been in line with inflation, the grant today would be £1,027.66 using the retail price index. The funeral payment form could be obtained by going to a Job Centre Plus office, downloading it from government.uk website, or the 0345 DWP bereavement service helpline, of which, Sir David, calls cost up to 55p a minute if you're using a mobile phone. And I would ask the Minister to consider that these sorts of helplines in DWP should be free to the consumer. They shouldn't have to pay 55p a minute to use such a service. Payments can be recovered from the deceased by the department and normally are. Funeral expenses are legally the first charge on the estate. Sir David, the Social Fund will be devolved to the Scottish Parliament with other social security powers. However, in advance but separate from this, the Scottish Government legislated to update the law around burials, cremations and funerals, following the scandals around the disposal of infant remains by hospitals and local authorities. That particular act was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament, and the key relevant points are that it gives the Scottish Government the power to regulate funeral directors and issue a code of practice for them. While there are 2 voluntary trade bodies for funeral directors, around 20% are not members of either. It allows the Scottish Government to issue guidance on the costs of funeral expenses, and it allows local authorities to provide travelling expenses to relevant persons in case of death or of looked after child or adult. Sir David, the DWP Social Fund funeral payment application form is 23 pages long with 12 pages of accompanying notes. A lengthy form by normal standards, but particularly strenuous when filled in by someone dealing with the death of a close relative or friend. 59% of applications in 2014-15 were successful in gaining an award. The length of time taken to process, along with DWP policy, to not only pay invoices for actual incurred expenses, i.e. not to advance cash to pay expenses, can mean real problems for those organising funerals and reluctance from funeral directors to allow terms on tick. In contrast to the DWP policy on, for example, universal credit, this form can only be posted or handed into the Job Centre Plus office. It cannot be done online, leading to many extra days' delays through posting and processing, and I would ask the Minister to look specifically at that issue. One issue highlighted by the Scottish Government is the disparity between the processes for the payment of benefit to a terminally ill claimant and the process for payment for their funeral. Claims based on the DS 1500 form take an average of 6 days to process, one of the few parts of the DWP system that would appear to work extremely effectively and efficiently, yet no cognizance has been taken of the unfortunate inevitability of death in the near future in regards to funeral payments. The Scottish Government are examining whether DS 1500 applicants or their proxies can apply for the funeral payment and receive a decision in principle before they die, allowing them and their families to plan more effectively and decrease the stress and confusion following their death. So David, in our view, the UK Government cannot go on ignoring the needs of people on low incomes. Funeral costs are sadly an inevitable part of people's lives, and forcing people who are already on benefits to pick up the enormous costs of a funeral is heartless and cruel. Citizens Advice Scotland has said the UK Government's Funeral Payments Fund has failed to keep up with the real cost of funerals in the last few years, leaving some families saddled with debts to bury or cremate their loved ones. The average award from the UK Government for help with a funeral in 2014-15 was £1,375, which is less than 40% of the estimated cost of an average funeral. The cost of an average funeral in the UK is £3,702. And we're asking the UK Government to commit to increasing spending and uptake of the social fund funeral payments to ensure the payment meets the essential cost of a funeral and to further increase the package that will be available in Scotland. So David, my colleagues, the Honourable Member for Coatbridge, Christ and Bells Hill and the Honourable Member for North Ayrshire and Arran have made the point that the UK Government must urgently look to tighten regulation of the funeral industry to ensure that the continuous rising costs of funeral are stopped in their tracks and that lower income families are not left with a huge financial burden at the time of their grief. The Citizens Advice Scotland said that in 2015 there was an increase of 35% on the number of advice sessions with clients on funeral costs, taking it to its highest level ever. Within the industry, there is also a worrying trend for encouraging people to enrol in sometimes cost-efficient funeral plans, as we've heard from honourable members in this debate, in the belief that it will save their loved ones money when the time comes. In many cases, this can mean the individual ends up paying thousands of pounds more than the actual cost of a funeral. So David, the Scottish Government's new powers over funeral payments are providing an opportunity to set up a new benefit which is more streamlined, predictable and better integrated with Scottish policy and is part of a wider focus on funeral costs and funeral planning. The Scottish Government has recognised the impact of rising funeral costs on families on low incomes, and we believe that this can help combat funeral poverty in Scotland, and therefore the Scottish Government's commissioned a report and recommendations by John Burrell, Chair of the Scottish Working Group on Funeral Poverty, to look into what action can be taken from a number of sectors. We need to look at speeding up the time in which a decision is made on funeral payments, put in place monitoring arrangements to track funeral poverty, alongside plans to evaluate funeral payments. So David, in closing, what I would say is that this Parliament had a great debate last year on assisted dying. And the main consensus of all honourable members across the House was that people were entitled to a good death. I would like the government to consider not only that people are entitled to a good death, that everyone is entitled to a good funeral. Thank you.